for a public town hall to talk about transportation. Just a couple of quick housekeeping things to give you a lay of the land. So this evening, the senator will come up. He's going to talk about his priorities, about transportation, about what is happening currently with our transit system, give some updates, share information about legislation that he is working to pass and legislation that he has passed. Also, we are going to do a Q&A at the end. Thanks to everybody who submitted your questions online. What we're going to do is popcorn back and forth between questions that were submitted online to questions that are in the room. So that will happen afterwards, so you can hold your questions towards then. If you'd also prefer, there is a note card on your chair. So if you prefer to just write your question down and pass it on down, we will come around and collect those as well. Also, we are recording this event just to let everybody know. We do plan to share it out after the event, especially for folks who might not be able to join us. We are not streaming live. We are taking photos, so if anyone prefers to not have their photo taken, to not use their image in future communications, just come find me, let me know. Also, we have wonderful folks supporting us today. We have our American Sign Language translators. Thanks so much for joining us. I also just want to thank all of our transit partners and champions who have helped us to bring this event to fruition. We've got a lot of folks in the room that really help bring awareness, garner support, and build advocacy around transportation. So if you just bear with me, I'm going to thank everybody who's helped us out. Access Living, Active Transportation Alliance, Better Streets Chicago, Bike Grid Now, Commuters Take Action, the Consulate General of the Netherlands, the Edgewater Environmental Coalition, Illinois Environmental Council, the Metropolitan Planning Council, Ride Illinois, Sierra Club of Chicago, and Urban Environmentalists of Illinois. And that list is certainly not everybody, but those are the folks that we honestly have worked with a lot in the last couple of years. I also just want to thank the Chicago Park District for hosting us this evening, the 20th District Police who are supporting us with this event, and a big shout out, I don't think she's here, but to Misty Mitchell. She's the staff person who runs this whole building, and she's great. So without, I'm going to stop talking now and introduce the senator, everybody, Senator Mike Simmons. Thanks so much.
Good evening, everybody. I am State Senator Mike Simmons. I represent the 7th District, which covers the neighborhoods of Uptown, Edgewater, Rogers Park, Westridge, Ravenswood, Andersonville, Arcadia Terrace, Buffalo Woods, and Wrigleyville. One quick housekeeping thing I wanted to mention is that I'm socially distancing tonight because I'm just getting over a sore throat. I'm not sick now, but out of respect for everybody here, I'll be wearing a mask when I'm not in the front of the room speaking. I hope that you understand that. So let's move on to the heart of the presentation this evening. First, just a little bit about myself. So I am born and raised in the 7th District. I grew up in public housing in Lincoln Square. I was one of the first people that grew up in scattered site housing that was built on the far north side of Chicago as a result of the 1976 Supreme Court control decision, which desegregated public housing. So I care a lot about housing. I care a lot about transit because growing up in this community, public transit is how I and my family were able to get around. So, on the 92 Foster bus, I grew up on Foster Avenue. That is a bus I took my entire childhood, teenage years, and going into my early adulthood. 36 Broadway, 151 Sheridan, Red Line, Brown Line, 84 Peterson. These are routes I've been taking my whole life and continue to take as your state senator. In fact, I get back and forth to the Capitol every week on the Amtrak. I'm in a carless household. I suspect that some of you here probably are also in carless households, either because you can't afford a car or because you choose to save our planet. And so thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for caring about public transit. A couple of other housekeeping things I wanted to mention. Just in my formal capacity as state senator, I sit on the following committees. I am the chair of the Public Health Committee. I'm the vice chair of the Behavioral and Mental Health Committee. I serve on the Senate Transportation Committee, elephant in the room, why we're here today. I serve on the Appropriations, Health, and Human Services Committee, as well as I always forget the 5th committee. Yeah, right. I'm new on the Senate Labor Committee. So those are my committee assignments in Springfield. I was sworn into the state senate in 2021, and in the 4 years that I've been there, I've been really active on housing, really active on transit and transportation, really active on mental health, really active on LGBTQ rights. I'm the first openly LGBTQ person elected to the Illinois Senate, currently the only member of the LGBTQ community to serve in the Illinois Senate. So a lot of work, right? A lot of representation, a lot of battles that I'm really trying to do justice to in this capacity. And I cannot do it without my community, and so that is why we're here today. This is a co-working, co-governing office. Of the 60 bills I've been able to get passed into law in the last 4 years, about half came directly from constituents. So those are ideas that came from letters that you've written to my office, folks who've come into our office in crisis who are dealing with some sort of issue that is a result of broken systems that are not serving people, that we've been able to address through legislation or through the budget. And just through other, people stop me on the street sometimes and bring things up to me, and we like to act on those things. So I hope that you will be vocal tonight in some of your experiences with transit. Also, in terms of housekeeping, I wanted to mention I'm an avid cyclist. In fact, a lot of constituents will say that I felt like I saw you on your bike coming down the Glenwood Greenway, or I saw you, coming down the street on the divvy. Yes, that was me. It was your state senator. And biking is something I've been doing since I was 5 years old. My grandmother put me on my first bike. I bike all the time now. It's one of my top ways that I commute, biking and using the buses. And so I know some of you here bike to get here tonight. I even saw somebody coming here on the skateboard. I just want to say I'm really impressed with the multimodal transportation option there. And I hope that we can make sure to incorporate that into our transit discussions. So with that, let's move into the main part of this town hall tonight. So I wanted to just, you've got some handouts here that'll give you kind of an idea of some transportation bills that I've been championing in the Illinois Senate, and some of those that I've been able to pass into law. This current session, just 2 weeks ago, I was able to pass a bill out of the Senate that legalizes the Idaho stop. Show of hands, how many people here know what the Idaho stop is? That's pretty much everybody. So it's a common sense piece of legislation. It will save a lot of lives. The federal government, Transportation Administration has recommended that the Idaho stop is a way that we make our streets safer for all users. So not just people that are on bikes, but people that are driving, people that are trying to cross the intersections, etc. So that's Senate Bill 2111. Senate Bill 1388 is a bill that would essentially create free transit or sharply reduce transit for those with very low income. Even though people think that $2.50 is not a lot to board a bus or a train, that can be really prohibitive for a single mother with 3 kids, an immigrant that hasn't been able to find work, or those that are just on hard times. And so I'm really pushing in the transit cliff discussions to implement a new program that would make it basically free or half price off for those that are under 138% of the federal poverty level. 138% of the federal poverty level is the cutoff for SNAP, those that are using SNAP, and so it seems to me that is a good baseline to help those that maybe are poor or very low income be able to access our buses and transit at a way that is affordable for them. Senate Bill 2285 is an initiative of Ride for Illinois, one of our partners is here tonight, that just expands the definition of what's a bicycle so that we can have more comprehensive planning around complete streets and greenways, not just in Chicago, but all across the state and suburbs. I also would like to point out that we have a handout here that talks about some of the bills from the previous General Assembly in 2023 and 2024. So you'll see Simmons bills passed into law. It's in pink and blue. Last session we passed Senate Bill 1892, which removes the ridiculous requirement that those that are disabled or those that are seniors have to keep proving to the state that they are disabled or that they are seniors. So we removed that requirement so that now they only have to do that every 5 years. I want to give a shout out to my constituent David Zoltan, who's right over here, who brought this initiative forward. We talked about co-governing. This is literally what we do. David came to me with this idea. We ran with it. We fought really hard. It was a very hard bill to get passed with a lot of nonsense that people put in the way to moving this. And we fought like hell. We got it passed, and we're making transit a lot more accessible for our seniors and those that are living with disabilities. Senate Bill 3451, how many of you here remember the Yellow Line crash last year? Okay, so we passed the bill that requires that all transit agencies have to make public any recommendations that the federal government has made for transit safety on our rail systems. So it's not good enough for the federal government to tell our transit systems, you need to do A, B, and C, and then they just don't do anything. We ought to make those things public, and then we need to see what the progress looks like every year. So that is a new requirement, that is a new public law that I was proud to bring forward. And then there are a few more here. Senate Bill 1864 was a bill that was able to pass into law 2 years ago that will accelerate the timeline for zero emissions procurement for our buses and trains in the state of Illinois. We don't have a lot of time on this issue when it comes to our planet and when it comes to carbon emissions. The transportation sector is one of the largest polluters in our state, and so it makes a lot of sense to me that we should be having zero emissions infrastructure at scale so that we bring down our carbon footprint in our state. So really excited about that law. Senate Bill 2278 is really wonky. I'm going to try to explain this in 10 seconds. So it removes an arcane requirement that we design our streets for trucks and semi-trucks. That's what it does. So why is that important? Because when we're talking about complete streets and designing suburbs and cities so that all multimodal users can use them, we don't want scenarios where trucks are dominating our roadways and making them unsafe, not just for cyclists, but people who maybe are crossing the street, buses that maybe are sitting at a bus bump out that don't have a way to get through because the roadway is designed for a truck that's 65 feet of length. It was a ridiculous requirement. I'm so glad we were able to outlaw that. And then I won't talk your ear off with the final two bills here, but Senate Bill 2014 is a big one because it requires that all roadway planning in the state of Illinois has to accommodate cyclists and those that are not on cars. And so that's really important because it's not good enough to just have greenways in the city of Chicago. We have suburbs right outside of Chicago where people that are biking want to be able to go to safely, and so it makes sense that we have continuous greenways throughout those localities and jurisdictions as well. And then Senate Bill 1710 is a bill that has to do with signage. So I'm gonna stop there because I really want to spend the bulk of our time tonight talking about the transit cliff. The $770 million deficit that our transit systems are facing right now, that is a result of money that we were able to get to our transit agencies from the federal government during the pandemic. So that money is dried out. The pandemic, we're not getting money anymore for pandemic-related crises, and so that means that our transit agencies are staring at a $770 million hole. I have been one of the senators in the Illinois Senate that has been very aggressive in saying that we are not only going to put money into our transit systems, but we're gonna need reforms, right? It's not enough to just write a check to our transit agencies without insisting on a number of reforms that I'm really excited about, and I have a feeling that many of you here are excited about too. And so a couple of those options, I'll just talk sort of what my vision is in terms of your state senator for what those reforms ought to look like. I think first of all, we need to plug that deficit, right? I'm not somebody that thinks let's just let the transit agencies have a $700 million deficit and start cutting service. Not an option, not interested. That's not going to work for me or any of my constituents. And so we've got to plug in that money, but these are the things I think we need to see. First of all, we need to see much more reliable and frequent service. What do I mean by that? Well, when we each walk out of here tonight and we wait for a bus or we wait for a train, it shouldn't take more than 10 minutes for a bus or a train to come, right? As like a very basic baseline, I will say that I've observed that just yesterday I was waiting for the 22 Clark in Rogers Park trying to get from Morse to Wrigleyville, 30 minutes because of bus bunching. And when the bus finally came, there were 3 back to back. That's ridiculous. And so what I've tried to do in these negotiations is to communicate with my colleagues in the transit agencies that we have to fix that. And so we've been really in the weeds. We had a very long meeting Tuesday morning, 9 a.m., where we were talking with CTA about this. And I'll actually say that I think the CTA understands this. I'm not going to speak for CTA, but they seem to understand that that is something that the community really needs. And they are making progress in that direction, but we've got to get light years ahead of where we are on that. And it has to be not just sometimes, right? Like anytime someone needs to use a bus or train, they need to know when they're planning that I will have a bus or train in 10 minutes. It can't be, oh, it might be 10, it might be 30, because that's not going to work for people that need to pick up their kids, people that want to recreate, or are just trying to get from point A to point B. The second thing that I think is really important, talk about game-changing reforms to our public transit systems. There are bus rapid transit systems that are currently in place in all parts of the United States. New York City is one city that comes to mind. Bogota, Colombia, parts of different municipalities in Germany, different municipalities in Japan have bus rapid transit, and I think this is a really important asset that we should have in Chicago and in our surrounding suburbs. How many of you have traveled on the Pulse BRT systems in Skokie? Okay, so we have a few Pulse users here. What Pulse is essentially, I'll explain this in plain English. So we have express buses in Chicago, and the problem with express buses is that they have the same bus bunching issues and all these other things. You don't have the infrastructure that makes it easy to board and pay a fare, and so those don't work for what we need. The Pulse system is basically bus rapid transit. It's a form of bus rapid transit where you have a bus coming down. I'll just make up a route. Let's say we had a bus rapid transit system on Foster Avenue. You would see a bus come at Foster and Broadway. All the passengers that need to get on the bus would be paying the fare before the bus even arrives. So when the bus comes, you just get on the bus, either the front or the back. You have a seat. The bus takes off. It doesn't stop again to Clark. You do the same thing. The bus doesn't stop again till Damon. Same thing, Western. You get the point. Every half mile, every mile. That bus is going to get from Broadway to Jefferson Park, which is about probably 7 miles in less than a half hour, if that. I think that's something that we need to be doing on a number of corridors throughout Chicago, and I've been really passionate about this because I've seen bus rapid transit in other cities, and I know that it is a really good, effective way to get people quickly to where they need to go. And what's good about that is that the PACE bus system is already doing this on 3 routes within a 10-mile radius of Chicago. Dempster and Skokie and Evanston has bus rapid transit, has the Pulse route. Milwaukee Avenue has a Pulse route, and the third one is that one is, yes. So Halsted is the third one. That one I believe is in planning. It has not actually broken ground yet, but they're planning to do this on South Halsted. They're planning to do this on 95th Street, and what I'd like for them to do is do this on Western Avenue. What I'd like for them to do is do this on Ashland Avenue. And what I've also said to the transit agencies is that on the far north side of Chicago, right here in our 7th Senate District, we have a real connectivity issue with people getting east and west. Okay, and I know this because I grew up at Foster and Lincoln, and my mom's hair salon was in Rogers Park. My grade school was closer to the lake, so I had to go east and west all the time. And so intrinsically, I can look at the system and say it is not easy for people to get east and west to places like Jefferson Park and Portage Park and these other places from the lakefront. They should have to drive or get an Uber to do that. So I've asked CTA to look at Lawrence Avenue is a potential option for either a Pulse type infrastructure or a BRT if it can accommodate the width of the road. Peterson Avenue would be another good candidate. Toohey, the PACE is looking at doing this on Toohey, which currently has a PACE route but could actually have a Pulse system there as well. So that's enough on BRT. The next thing that I think is really important, in addition to frequency, reliability, and game-changing reforms such as bus rapid transit, it's just safety. We really need to feel like when we get on our transit systems that everybody is safe. And I want to be really nuanced about this. I don't think that it's enough to just pack our buses and trains with police officers. Law enforcement has a role, but a lot of our communities have said that they don't think that when people are dealing with mental health issues on a lot of our transit systems, that a police officer is not the appropriate response in that particular scenario. So what I've suggested that we do is hire transit ambassadors. What are transit ambassadors? Transit ambassadors are people that look just like you and me, plainly clothed, who are trained in customer service, who are trained in de-escalation tactics, who are trained in making people feel like safe and competent users of our transit systems. Other municipalities such as Washington, D.C. and Boston have already hired transit ambassadors and have them on their buses and trains. I think we ought to do the same thing here in Chicago. And the good thing is that in the negotiations that we're having, this is on the table, and this seems to have gotten through to people that this is something that we absolutely should do in Chicago, and I'm confident that we're going to get there. The other part of safety is just infrastructure safety. So the yellow line crash, right? That's the other part of safety. Is we don't want accidents on our buses and trains that can be prevented. The legislation I spoke to earlier is one thing that I brought forward to deal with safety, but I think that we need to be thinking about this at a systemic level and the reforms that we are pushing as a result of this transit cliff. I welcome any ideas that folks here might have around how to keep our trains safe from collisions, etc. And so those are a few of the reforms that I think about when I go to sleep every night that are just front of mind because I really care about this and really think that the time has come for us to move on these types of improvements. A couple of other things that I would like to say. around game-changing reforms. You know, I think that we also really need to be thinking about expanding service. So BRT is one example of that. There are some of our bus run, I should say it like this. Our work schedules have changed since the pandemic. People are not just going to work from 9 to 5, going downtown and coming home. That's not what it is anymore. There are people who can choose when they work, right? They have a dynamic schedule. You have people in my district who are taking 2 and 3 hour commutes to get way out to the suburbs to work a job at a data center that pays the minimum wage. First of all, that is a problem, right? That there are people who are so dislocated from work that they have to commute 2 hours to get to a job that pays them nothing and is a dynamically scheduled where they don't get benefit. That itself is a whole other problem. But if they're gonna have to work those jobs, we ought to at least make it easy for them to get there. And it shouldn't have to be a scenario where I can't get to the metro to get to this particular suburb because the bus that would get me to the metro stops running at 6:30 p.m. That's crazy. So my vision for our transit systems is for them to have more of a 24/7 scheme in terms of how they operate. OWL service, how many of you here know what OWL service is? Okay, all it means is the buses and trains run at night, right? I don't know if they use this in other cities, but if you look at our bus placards here, you'll see a little owl means it runs at night. That ought to be an amenity that we offer to more people that have jobs that they have to work at night, or who want to get to where they need to go to at night and not worry about safety or connectivity. So I'll stop there. I want to make sure we have an opportunity for some Q&A. Before I do, a few other things I wanted to remember to make sure I say. My personal mantra on transit is no funding without reform. That is really what it comes down to. $770 million hole. We need to fill that hole, but we also need to insist on some changes, and we need to do that through statute, and that is my North Star at this time. The other thing I wanted to say was, before we go to Q&A, is I want to talk very briefly about the proposals that are on the table. So there are two that you probably have heard of. There's Senate Bill 5, which is the Metropolitan Mobility Act, and then there's Senate Bill 1938. How many of you here are familiar with both of these bills by show of hands? Okay, so I won't talk your ear off about what they do, but let me just say really quickly that SB 5 really is a governance bill that would change how all of our transit systems are governed. So really a simple way to put it is that it would essentially disassemble the CTA, the Metro Pace, RTA, and consolidate all those transit agencies under one authority. That would also mean that any of the decisions around management, oversight, procurement, universal fares would all fall under that authority. That's Senate Bill 5. I'm a chief co-sponsor on that bill because I think that we really need to be thinking about how to make our systems function as one, so that, you know, in Chicago, if somebody needs to get 50 miles out to St. Charles, Illinois, or Elgin, or Aurora, or south down into Madison and places like that, where actually a lot of those jobs I talked about earlier are located, they should be able to do it with one fare, on one system, with one schedule. There's another proposal that has been brought forth, Senate Bill 1938, which is an initiative that's been drafted by labor groups, AFL-CIO, and a number of other labor organizations. And this initiative would essentially include the Transit Ambassadors initiative I talked about earlier. It would have some improvements around maintaining the current structures of CTA, Metro Pace, so those agencies would stay in place under Senate Bill 1938. I think it's really important for me to make sure that you understand that too. Under Senate Bill 19, the key difference there is under Senate Bill 5, the transit agencies go away, they become one agency. Under Senate Bill 1938, CTA, Metro, and Pace, RTA stay in place, but some of the responsibilities are rearranged under the latter bill. You know, I think that either of these bills could be a good vehicle for the types of reforms that we need. The final version of this is not going to look like either of these two bills because we are currently negotiating all that. That is why I wanted to do this town hall, because I want to incorporate as much of my constituents' feedback into that process as possible. In addition to the 5 hearings that were held late last year and earlier this year by the Senate Transportation Committee, where we had an opportunity to hear from folks. And so I wanted to really make sure that you understand both of those bills and make sure that I hear what input you have and get a sense for where your input might fit into either of those bills or whatever the final product might look like. And let me ask Heather, have I left anything out? Okay. All right. There's a lot more I could say. I am a transit nerd. I could sit down and have coffee and talk about transit for hours, but I'm going to stop there because I really want to make sure we have time for Q&A. But if you have any questions on anything that I've said, or you need any clarity on anything I said, I will hang around after the town hall, make sure I have a chance to answer your questions. You also can always reach out to my office directly. If some people town halls, they want to listen, they may feel shy. You should come to my district office, you should write me, you should stop me if you have any questions. So with that, I'm going to stop and we're going to open it up to Q&A at this time. So thank you very much for your attention and for being here.
Okay, so we're going to kick it off first with, or here, let me give you the lay of the land. If you have a card and you've written a question on it, we have Gabby and Payman walking around collecting those. If you would pass it down to one end of the aisle, they'll come grab it from you. And as they're doing that, if we could start with a live question, please. Anybody who has a question, sir, in the red.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep, if you
Yes. So thank you, all of you. I think I've asked this for years. I've been here 20 years and have never had a car. And so bus and trains are my mode. What is happening? You mentioned it. So is it a specific practice of CTA officials to actually go to different cities in this country and across the globe to see what works? I have been in many big cities and have not experienced what I experience in Chicago, with delays, with ghosting, with filth, and with crime. Never have I experienced that to the extent that I experience it almost daily in Chicago. Also, what are the executives doing to come to work? Has it ever been put to them? Do any of them regularly take CTA to go to work? Or do they just do it when the cameras are on? So, thank you. And you should think about running for Jan Schakowsky's office. Sorry.
Thank you. Let me start with your first question. First of all, can you tell me what neighborhood you're in?
I'm in Rogers Park.
Okay, Rogers
Red
Park.
line.
Red line, Rogers Park. So let me start with the first question. This issue around cleanliness and ghost busing. I was actually just kicking myself because I forgot to mention ghost busing because I was talking about reliability, which falls under the moniker. So I have, I would just say in every one of my meetings with CTA, I've brought up issues around this app. This venture app that tells us what's the route? The 97 Skokie bus will be here in 5 minutes. 5 minutes comes by. Dude. It's like the death screen. Bus doesn't come, the sun sets, you're late getting where you need to go. That cannot happen. Yeah. We are not giving $700 million to transit agencies, and that continues. It's entirely unacceptable. So CTA has committed to me that they are looking to rectify this issue with pulling in another vendor to help with some of the information that needs to go into the app to communicate to the commuter when that bus and train is going to arrive. I've been very clear to them, though, that I don't care about the inside baseball. All I care about is whatever the final outcome is, that I and my constituents, when the bus is going to be there in 5 minutes, is there. And if it's not, then just show me a live map on the app where I can see where the bus is. If I'm trying to get the 147 to get downtown and I'm at Foster Avenue, the next 147 is at Howard, just show me the little icon where the bus is at Howard. We're Chicagoans, we can take it. Because some of us will just walk over and get the red line, right? We want to also have agency in how we commute. I don't want to sit at the bus barn or you to sit at the bus barn and just wait and no one's telling you what the hell is going on. That doesn't make any sense in a city like Chicago. So I hear you on that, and we have been really lighting a fire with the transit agencies on this. I think I brought this up in every one of our hearings, and in our interim meetings that we have insisted on having with these agencies, where we continue to grill them on this. And the issue of cleanliness, I'm glad you brought this up because with CTA I've talked to them about how what would it cost to power wash all of our buses and trains at the end of each route. So not at 8 hours, not at 9 hours, not once every 2 or 3 days, not once a week, but literally, especially our routes that are really long, like the 49 Western, like 10, 20 mile route. Let the bus sit at the garage for 10, 20 minutes. Let's pay somebody to come in there scrub down the bus or use whatever it takes to make the bus one that when you sit down on it, you're not looking at the floor at somebody's bag of uneaten food that's on the floor, a cup of soda that someone threw down, a bag of beers. I am, as a lifelong Chicagoan, I am sick and tired of that. Because I know that people that have an option to not ride our transit systems will choose not to because they don't want to experience that on their way to work or and whatever they're doing for that day. So I hear you on that too. And where we've left things on that is that we've asked CTA to give us a cost estimate of what it would look like to power wash and have a process to clean down our buses and trains much more frequently than they currently do. They have said that that's cost prohibitive, and I always say that's bureaucrat talk. I just need to know what the cost is, because if you want $800 million from the state government, then like all options ought to be on the table. And so, and then also there's this other issue with the ghost busing where I know they're going to be looking for a new vendor this summer to try to amalgamate all of the transit schedules under the one app, under the new unified system. But we'll keep pushing on that, even if we end up passing something that doesn't take down the CTA, the Metro, the PACE, and ends up preserving the current systems. We still have to fix the ghost busing system. So, or
Yeah, let's go back and forth.
Okay.
To just be consistent. Okay, this one is, I think, about Idaho stops, generally speaking, and you're a little concerned. It says, since you supported legislation allowing bicycles to ignore traffic signs on the street, could you address the constant violation of law by bicycle, scooter, and other devices on sidewalks on Sheridan that potentially endanger seniors?
yeah. Well, so let me first clarify the Idaho stop. So Senate Bill 2111, I think is really important for me to take extra pains to communicate the policy goals of this legislation. This bill gives cyclists the option to yield at a stop sign if there are no hazards, right? So if I'm on a bike and I come to an intersection and there's a stop sign and there's no cars in either direction, I now can legally go through that intersection without traffic violation. If there's a big truck or a car or even a pedestrian that's crossing, I need to stop. That's the definition of what it means to yield. So, this came up in the Senate Transportation Committee. Some of my colleagues thought, are you just trying to make it possible for cyclists to just blaze through stop signs? That's absolutely not what this is. I would love to create a bike grid system similar to what you have in Copenhagen, where cyclists have their own roadways and have their own places that are parallel to our main roads, and I think we can get there someday in Chicago because we already have a grid system. Our city is laid out in the grid. That is a gift that we have from the bike gods, and so we can get there, right? But I do think that we don't want to have a scenario where people are just blazing through stop signs, because that's not going to make anybody safer or the roads any more predictable. I want to also mention that there's some states that treat red lights as yield options also. We are not doing that in this legislation because we thought that it'd be important to have a two-step approach to this. And I'm working on this with the Active Transportation Alliance and a number of other stakeholders that are really, really smart on the research and the data on this. And we think that SB 2111 is the safest option at this time in Illinois. And then the second part of that question was, I've lost it, I'm sorry.
Addressing the bicycles, scooters, and other devices on the sidewalks.
Yeah.
Along Sheridan especially.
Right, so the thing about the state legislator is that my jurisdiction, I don't have jurisdiction over the public way on some of these streets in Chicago. So that falls under the municipal government, so that's gonna be our alders and our mayor. If any of the person that asked that question, I would really, in a friendly way, encourage them to follow up with our city elected officials on that. I have my own point of view on this sort of thing. I think that we ought to make sure that our sidewalks are safer for those that need to walk. I'm also a pedestrian. I love to walk. I walk probably about 10 miles every few days or so. And I think that, when I'm walking down the sidewalk, I get a lot of anxiety with alleys, with cars that just sort of pip up out of nowhere, and I'm like in my headphones or on the calls, and so we want pedestrians to be safe also. But in terms of formal laws, I don't have the ability to bring forward any legislation that would specifically address that issue.
Great. Okay, we'll take another question from the audience. You with the strung over your shoulder.
Yeah, so as part of the transit consolidation mandates, is there any way to mandate Metro to actually use Metro instead of using the app? Because it'd be really nice to be able to tap on when they get on the train and then tap off when I get off the train. So things like a lot of other cities do.
Yeah.
In fact, we need a
Yeah.
To take everybody singly, it just feels very antiquated.
Yeah, yeah. What neighborhood are you in from?
I'm sorry?
What neighborhood are you in from?
Like Edgewater, Anderson.
Right here, okay. So, the answer is yes. You know, that's part of what this whole consolidation verbiage is meant to create a scenario where all the transit systems are doing the same thing. So if we were to pass SB 5 or even a version of SB 1938, ideally the outcome would be that Metro has the same fare collection process that CTA and the other transit agencies are using. So, you know, other cities, and I think you kind of alluded to this too, in some other cities, you have a conductor there or a transit ambassador who's helping you to pay your fare. So that the bus conductor just focuses on driving the bus, right, and not all the other stuff. I think that that's what we should be doing in our transit agencies. It should be the same muscle memory for the commuter between each of the agencies, right? I use Metro too. I use Pace. I go out into the collar counties from time to time. And you know, when I get on the Metro, sometimes I think to myself, like, I don't want to always have to do all this, right? Like, and sometimes I just have work to do. Like, I don't want to sit here and do, like, I would rather just tee all this up before I board the train. And so, again, that consolidation verbiage is meant to have all the transit agencies doing the same thing in the way that you just suggested.
Okay, great. One more from the submitted questions. In regards to the legislation around the fiscal cliff, who is lined up in favor of Senate Bill 5 and who is against it, and how can we apply pressure?
What an excellent question. So who is lined up in favor of Senate Bill 5? Let me first say I don't have the exact list of the proponents and opponents right in front of me right now, but I can generally tell you under Senate Bill 5, the proponents have been the Transit Advocacy Organization, so groups like Active Transportation Alliance. I believe White Grid Now is probably in support of the legislation. Organizations that are very forward-thinking on public transit. Commuters taking action, I think. I don't know if they formally slipped in support of it, but philosophically, these are groups that would be down for what Senate Bill 5 wants to do in terms of unifying and having our system all do the same thing. The groups that are not in support are, you know, City of Chicago is not really a big fan of Senate Bill 5 because they don't want to see the CTA be abolished. That really is what it comes down to. And let me be, I'm not somebody that I'm not gonna like be mealy mouthed about it. Like I get their anxiety around that, right? You tell even our bus drivers, hey, we want to abolish CTA. That gives them a lot of anxiety because they don't know, well, what the hell is gonna come, you know, in lieu of it. And you know, I grew up in Chicago, right? Like what happens if CTA goes away? That's scary to a lot of people. What I've really been focused on is what is the thing that we want, and let's figure out how we get there. But that's I think a good overview of where the pros and the proponents and opponents are on Senate Bill 5 and the MMA. In terms of Senate Bill 1938, it's a lot of the labor groups. So it's Illinois AFL-CIO, the Amalgamated Transfers Union, which represents a lot of our bus operators and train operators, are supportive of Senate Bill 1938. The Chicago Federation of Labor is supportive of Senate Bill 1938. You know, what we can do is, you know, this is all public, by the way. So if you go to www.ilja.gov, and if you click on Senate Bill 5, and you click on opponents, they'll show you exactly who is in favor and against the bill. Okay, so that is my way of empowering everyone in this room tonight, is that first I would look at that and see who's for and who's against. If there's groups that you think should be there and are not, you should contact them. If there are groups that are opposed to one of the bills that you favor, contact them. If there are groups that you are a part of that you think would support one of those two bills, they should slip in support of it. And let me know, right? Copy me on that, because I will start to speak to that in my negotiations and say, you know, I've got group A, B, and C that represent these particular type of commuters, these particular type of public transit, people who are dependent on public transit, who want to see Senate Bill X pass. Right, that's a whole different ballgame, and so that's a big part of the process as well. I'm trying to think. Connor is my fellow. Connor's actually on my staff, but he's also really tuned into transit issues. Have I left out any proponents or opponents that come to mind?
Center Street, Chicago. I'm a co-founder. We're doing canvassing in Hyde Park this weekend. We're also doing canvassing in Austin.
Okay.
A plug: if you want to give us donations, we can print out more palm cards and go out and speak to commuters. We did that during the election, and And I am deeply disappointed in Brandon Johnson not living up to his transportation platform. I literally gave him ideas for his platform. He hasn't done a goddamn thing to improve transit in this city. And it's despicable. And my question, sorry, there are state roads. Sheridan is controlled by the state of Illinois. The average speed of a CTA bus is 9 miles per hour. I can go 20 miles per hour on my e-bike.
Yeah.
When it's rush hour, the bus hits every red light, you're sitting in traffic, and it's preventable. And so we need to force the city, we need to force the state to build the infrastructure to speed up our buses.
Yeah.
Because it's a policy decision.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. Couple things I wanted to say, and Courtney, thank you so much for being here. So Courtney was saying that you're part of Better Street Chicago. Okay, so Better Street Chicago is another major advocacy organization and organizing group that is as pivotal and is very important in this whole debate. And so Courtney is just giving you some very concrete ways that you can get involved with their group. And so I encourage you to stick around after the town hall meeting. This is also a great opportunity to just organize and get us all focused on this. So I'm glad you brought that up. And then let me come back to Sheridan Road too. So one of the things I could talk for 2 hours about reforms. The other one I want to mention, I cannot leave here without mentioning, is that I've been really, really aggressive about DuSable Lakeshore Drive. It is a state-controlled road. It is a death trap. I am so sick and tired of getting onto Lakeshore Drive, and there are cars going 80 miles an hour. That's unsafe, it's unnecessary, and there are other ways that people can be commuting on DuSable Lakeshore Drive. I think that we ought to have bus rapid transit on Lakeshore Drive. I've said this publicly. I've pushed IDOT on this as recently as just this spring. I've sat down with the new Secretary of the Illinois Department of Transportation, Gia Biaggi, who was formerly with CDOT in the city of Chicago, and I've put a lot of pressure on IDOT to move in this direction. And I've given them a lot of ideas for how to implement this. Like we're not just saying, hey, do BRT on Lakeshore Drive. We literally come to them with models and say, you know what we can do is you could have a dedicated lane for buses on Lakeshore Drive, and then when it gets to Michigan Avenue, have BRT infrastructure from Oak Street all the way to Roosevelt Road, so that bus zips down Michigan Avenue. Because if you live in Edgewater and you want to get to the museum, it's great to take the 147 or any other express bus and get 10 minutes to Oak Street. It absolutely sucks to then sit for 45 minutes as the bus goes literally a mile and a half from Oak Street to south of Madison. So we've given them those ideas. We talked about doing a similar BRT infrastructure north of Foster Avenue on Sheridan Road, so that you can have a bus-only infrastructure going from Foster all the way to Howard, so that the 147 is literally like it already is an excellent route, but think about if you were able to shorten you talked about those buses sitting at red lights. If we could eliminate that, a lot more people would be getting in on transit systems. Let's just leave it at that. And they'd leave those cars at home, and we would bring down our carbon emissions, and it would be better for our transit systems. So we're continuing to push on that. I also just quickly housekeeping want to shout out. We have Alder Linneman and Hoppenworth in the room right here, and we also have Shanika Hohenkirk from Alder Maria Haddon's office. Thank you so much for being here. Okay, we can go to the next one.
Okay. Next question is, what disability accessibility reforms are currently on the table so far?
Yeah. So, never enough. The thing about this is that, any of our transit systems need to be accessible for people of all abilities. The example that comes to mind in the district I represent is the Sheridan Red Line. Sheridan Red Line is not accessible. It is a frequently used train station. I don't understand why those upgrades haven't been done in Sheridan, but we've had upgrades done in other transit stations in our district. So Argyle, Berwyn, Bryn Mawr, great work happening there. I don't want to keep taking an incremental approach to this. Like, it's not enough for somebody who maybe uses a wheelchair that lives in Edgewater to have to think, I want to go to Irving Park, but can I actually get off the train to Irving Park? Oh, I can't get, so I'm not going to do it. I'm going to take the bus. Oh, but the bus takes that. I don't want people to have that much brain damage about going 3 miles. 3 miles. Okay. Like, I just, there's more that we need to do on this. in terms of any specific proposals, a lot of them are more piecemeal. I would like for our transit agencies to have a broad, sort of sweeping approach to this that really honors the Americans with Disabilities Act, that implements these improvements at scale and at grade. You know, I'll say that the CTA did an excellent job with our buses about 20 years ago. I grew up on buses that were not accessible, and we saw a lot of the new procurements in the late 90s and early 2000s start to bring on buses that could actually accommodate those that were disabilities, and actually reconfigure the seating so that those that have disabilities have priority seating. That's something, it's not enough. I think our trains have a lot of a way to catch up on that. They're just frankly not where our buses are in terms of accessibility. And I think that ought to be happening for, again, all of our public transit systems, so that people that are living with disabilities don't even have to think about this or have their caregivers think about it, because that is awfully stressful.
Great, we're gonna take another question. Sorry.
Thank you. I retired from the CTA schedule department. I think one of the things you should realize that the buses deal with automobile traffic, and they can't get around that. Secondly, you have senior citizens, and you have people getting on with all kinds of bag of paper trying to get on with the kitchen sink. And they have to wait, that's why they're late. And the last of all, they have personnel problems. There's a lot of people coming to work every day, just like Bob at your job. So we're kicking the CTAs, they're doing the best they can.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I really do.
Could you repeat the question?
Repeat the question, I didn't hear anything.
So the gentleman was just saying that he formerly worked in the CTA scheduling department, and I'm just paraphrasing what you said. He's giving flowers to those that operate our CTA systems, that are doing about as good a job as they can. And I agree with that 100%. I mean, I'm actually going to be going out to the North Park bus garage. I was supposed to go tomorrow, but I'm just getting over a sore throat, so we're going to go next week. To just be in that facility and just talk to the bus operators and see what is it like to, it's a big, my impression of what it means to operate a bus is it is a big operational undertaking to you know, coordinate the schedules, to get the bus, to make sure the bus is able to work and run the routes, to get it out, to compete with traffic, to compete with cranky rider. It's a lot that we expect from our bus operators. And every opportunity I give, I try to meet them. I try to let them know I've been on your buses my whole life. It's a really important part of how I was able to get to the state senate. It's an important part of how I'm able to get down to the Capitol and do my work, because I take public transit to get down 300 miles to Springfield. And so we love our bus operators. And in the discussion around the MMA consolidation, I've been really trying to make it clear to my colleagues that, you know, I don't want to have a committee hearing where we just bash CTA. That's easy, right? That's the easy thing to do. But what we want to talk about is what are the problems and what are the solutions, and how can we incorporate bus operators are still going to be a part of the solution, right? Even if we have BRT, you can't do it without a bus operator. And so I just want you to know that's something that's important to me as well. I can pick people, but Heather's a lot better.
Yeah, and I'm gonna try and
Yeah, we'll
stick
make
with
sure
the
everybody
plan.
gets to ask their question.
So, what are the transit agencies proposing to help solve the fiscal climate?
Yeah. And let me ask, do we have, is Kathleen Woodruff here? Okay, Kathleen, do you want to speak to just some of what CTA is doing? Not to put you on the spot, but it's all in
Specifically, what we're doing, what in regards to it.
the transit. What does CTA want to see in terms of the transit plan? What is CTA proposing?
Well, I think we're looking, you know, basically I'm in the government community relations department, and, you know, obviously we're up on all of the bills. I think one, you know, we're officially not supporting any at the moment. We're kind of watching everything as it goes by, but I think probably the labor, what we call the labor bill, second one down.
1938.
Yeah, 1938 one it probably has a lot more of the aspects. I mean, it's, you know, it's not just CTA that doesn't seem to be in support of MMA, it's all the other ones too.
The other transit, so
Pace.
Metro, Pace, RTA,
Exactly.
are not
So-
supportive of SB5. The
So,
consolidation.
it's all of the transit boards that are not really seeing that, you know, that would be a good fix.
Yeah, and Kathleen, not to put you on the spot, this is all in the spirit of public service, but we had a really good meeting on Tuesday morning, myself, you, and your team. Do you mind just talking a little bit about some of the ideas that we have talked about in terms of what CTA would like to do in the near future?
I mean, just recently, we're improving, especially areas in the southwest side of the city that have much longer headways for bus times, to make those closer to 10 minutes. And then that phase will continue to move throughout the city. So that is a major priority right now. You know, we do have new leadership under acting President Norley Sharon. So, you know, there are a lot of things happening. And to answer some questions, a lot of us take CTA. We all have the lived experience. And that, you know, obviously, I can see why people ask that. But, you know, BRT is not simple. You know, it's not just us, it's CDOT, you know, and Ashland has been tried. And I go back 10 years and read how that went. You know, there was a lot of neighborhood of people, because people are upset about losing the parking. So, you know, I've been in many countries, and even Los Angeles that has BRT. It's great, right? But there's a lot of people at that table. There's
Yeah.
a lot of
So that's
more
what,
than just us.
yeah, no, and thank you for that, Kathleen. I do appreciate it. So that's where I come in. The political will is there now to do BRT, and way maybe perhaps was not 10 to 15 years ago when they tried to do this on Ashland Avenue. There's a big ask from a lot of people in the community to do this now, and so that's the spirit that we've been approaching it at this point in time. The other thing too is, somebody did ask earlier about frequency, and I think, Kathleen, what you talked about on the south and west side is part of this new initiative the CTA has rolled out. Can I put you on the spot to talk a little bit about that? I think it's a good
Sure.
deliverable that you should,
Yeah, sure.
frequent service.
Yeah, I think it's called the frequent, I'm like blanking on the title of it. But it's essentially looking at the city as a whole, seeing where, again, the longest times are. And within phases, kind of, you know, basically we do a reschedule of all the bus operators it's a little bit more than a quarter. And so as of that, you know, we make the new schedule essentially, new schedule of where we want to be focused and where we want to put more resources. And so, you know, we looked at the city as a whole, and we saw that the most need was on the south and west side, and that historically have not gotten the service that they should. So we're starting there, and then by the summer, we're gonna start seeing it in more the north side, more
By the
of-
summer,
By the
right?
summer,
That's
yeah.
why I asked
Only, I
Kathleen.
mean, yes.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's in a friendly way. I mean, that's why I asked Kathleen to speak to this, because this is an opportunity for accountability, right? The CTA, I think, is doing the right thing with the more frequent service. And just to really put a dot on it, I think that what I saw in our briefing was your new CEO said every 6 minutes for every 6, every 8, every 10. Those were numbers I liked,
Yes,
right?
yeah.
Can you
The goal is definitely 10, you know, just like. you know,
every 10 minutes, right? Bus and train, all day, not just rush hour.
Right, not just
Okay,
rush hour.
we all heard that, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's good. I think that's progress, especially if we can get rid of ghost buses if they don't exist anymore, or there's just transparency around when a bus is 3 miles away and not 3 minutes away. I think that would be significant progress.
And, but like my former colleague said, you know, the bus bunching, we wish we could solve bus bunching, because gridlock is gridlock. And, you know, just like you said about people coming on, people with you know, with a wheelchair, you start adding the seconds, and, you know, do we need a better system? Do we need boarding at grade? There's lots of things we need, but as the system is right now, you start adding the seconds
Right,
on,
right.
and then you miss the next light, and then, you know what I mean?
Right, and see, that's why having, thank you for that.
Sure.
And that's why having bus rapid transit is key, because if you have bus rapid transit, you have that at grade payment and boarding and all these other things that cut down on those times that it takes the bus to arrive. Those buses are diminished, or at least, like I said, there's transparency around where the vehicle actually is, so, okay.
Okay, I'm gonna take another one that was submitted. This is about a little bit like we were talking anticipation, like knowing when the next bus or the next train is coming. So the comment is, you know, bus stops and signs say things like early evening or late evening. It would help if it just said when the last bus runs.
Excellent question. This is such a lot of the ideas for reform are so elemental and not like Einstein genius level stuff. Some of it is, but it really isn't. And that makes a lot of sense, and I think we should pipe that feedback back to CTA, Metro, and PACE, and RTA, because some people may not know what early evening means, right? Early evening could mean, hey, I'm a night owl, so early evening for me might be 10:30 p.m.
Okay.
You.
Well, just as, Adam Sheffield with Edgewater, just on that last point, as a defensive measure, I think I'm very familiar with the CTA maps, and if you go to the map schedule, which you can get as a PDF, after the pandemic was gone, then they started appearing in print. They're very handy, and they do have the first and last times. I understand they're not on the signs at the bus stop, but it is in the schedule. So, that's not, that doesn't solve the bus, but I think, there is information, you just have to be diligent about finding it. But I had another point before about well, I just say, I'm glad as a senior I have this RTA permit, and I wonder if that was discussed already. Whether there's gonna be funding for that under any plan going forward.
Yeah, I have not seen any specific proposal that would adjust the permit issue. Kathleen, is this ringing a bell for you at all?
The maps.
Yeah, with the general.
Yeah.
The RTA senior permit?
Oh, yeah, that is all goes through RTA. So they would
have
use
any-
fare cards.
Yeah, do you have any intelligence about future funding for that?
I mean, it would just be, speculation, but I mean, it's a very popular program, I don't see it, but it is all run through RTA, not us. I mean, yes, it is to ride our system, but RTA is the one that,
Right.
That's where you have to go to
Yeah.
put in the information to get the card, their card.
So it also intersects with the state, it intersects with the
Right,
DOA.
Right, CTA is an agency of the state, not the water.
What I was gonna say is that, I think a really clean way to answer this question is that I don't foresee a scenario where any funding gets passed that cuts anything that doesn't currently exist. So that would be the program you're talking about, that would be service levels, or any amenities that our transit agency. I personally will walk through Hellfire to protect what we have, because I think there's a good footprint of a system in place. Let's not screw it up, and let's build it and bring in those game-changing reforms. So, I think the program that you're talking about, we'll do due diligence and look into that and make sure. If I could ask Connor if we can make a note to follow up on that, we'll get your info and get you a detailed update on it.
It's a great program, because it's familiarized myself, I'm able to familiarize myself with PACE and with Metro, and really appreciate what they bring to the table.
Yeah.
Getting around the larger area.
Yeah.
And the link up with CTA, which is now fairly long time ago, in terms of fares, and that was brilliant. I mean, that's sort of a forerunner of
Yeah.
this other stuff.
Yeah.
Right. That you can put money on the Metro app, you can board CTA, Metro, or PACE. That is a good, that is
Yeah, well, that, I don't know if that's all happened quite to that extent, but with the permit.
no, it has. You can.
Has it?
Yeah.
Okay, the Metro, okay.
You can do that now, and you couldn't 15 years ago.
Permit is a Metro card, so I guess.
Yeah, but we'll check on that and get back to you.
Thanks.
Great, okay. Another submitted question on a card. How can the state and municipalities build fiscal resilience in order to fund investments in transit and housing, I
Yep.
believe, in the face of diminishing federal funding opportunities?
You know what, I'm just gonna say it, and this is what I've been saying, I'm a member of the Senate Progressive Caucus, and so I've been saying we really have to push for revenue. I'm tired of austerity debates, I'm sick of it. I'm tired of people in government who don't rely on these systems, who are out of touch, who say, oh, well, just cut the system, cut 40% cuts the CTA, oh, well, we ought to, tighten our shoe. You can't tighten seatbelts on bus drivers who are driving buses for 11 and 12-hour shifts. That's the status quo right now. Some of our CTA bus drivers are on buses for 12 hours. And so we need more revenue to fix these problems. And so I and some of my progressive colleagues have brought forward a number of revenue ideas, such as a tax on digital advertising, which would bring in $800 million, such as a tax on those who are billionaires in our state, which would bring in several hundred millions of dollars. There are 10 specific proposals that progressives have brought forward. We have a good contingent of progressives right now in the state senate that we did not have 5 years ago. And we've done our homework and we brought proposals forward. And the people who dwell on austerity are frankly like a little flat-footed right now, because I have not really heard them talk about any solutions or any reason why we can't move forward on something like the digital tax on advertising. So that would be my answer, is the way that we rectify this issue and keep it from happening again is we have a much fairer tax system in our state. We put those taxes in place where they make sense, and where we dedicate the public goods that we all use. Everybody's depending on public transit, whether they use it or not, because if we continue the current pace that we're at now, our planet is not going to be where it is in 100 years. It isn't. And I could talk about all the issues around climate change, but I want to make sure we get more questions, but I'm sure you get the drift.
Sir in the red jacket, you raised your hand a couple of times.
Yeah, thank you so much. So again, thank you for doing this, and especially thank you for your advocacy around Lakeshore Drive. My quick question is around hiring. Anyone who's ridden, especially the CTA trains in the last few years, knows that there was a huge exodus of rail operators. There's a pipeline where they come in as flaggers, and then eventually after some time in service, they're given the option to move to rail operators. So there's a pipeline of hiring. Last year, when Dorval Carter was in charge, they accelerated the pipeline to try to close the gap between where they say that they are, running these schedules where they actually weren't. They publish that data every month. The last 4 months, there have been 0 hirings of flaggers and rail operators. Absolutely none. I don't know if that's changing. I don't know if their dashboards are not up to date, but whatever they were doing in the last, basically 2024, April to December, to hire about 100 operators, they've lost 30 now. And they're increasing schedules. I don't understand how that's possible, but related to what you're doing, how are you accounting for hiring and staffing, service increases, especially given that any reforms that we pass now might not take effect for 2 years, maybe 3 years, and in that time, we need to continue hiring rail operators to fix, what we're running now.
Yeah, you're absolutely right that the transit agencies have to be hiring rail operators and bus operators to meet enhanced service. And so the first piece, and I'm not happy to hear that they haven't been making progress on this in the last few months, so we will look into this. I think that that's important.
I will speak to one thing.
Okay, please. Yeah.
So, over COVID, we were down, when I came on in 2022, we were down 800 bus operators. That's a lot of people. And it, 1,000 people come to a career fair.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Yeah, I can't hear you either.
Outside voice.
Outside voice, okay.
Bus operator voice.
Okay. So when I came on in 2022, we were down 800 bus operators, okay? So we did massive amounts of hiring. And it took us about probably a year and a half to get right to, 2019 levels in terms of employees. Now, it's a very different route to go from being a bus operator to being a train operator. Everybody that starts off as a flagger to become a train operator, there is no permanent flagger position. You start off as a flagger in hopes that either you kind of make it or you don't. The attrition does not happen as much at all with the train operators as it does with bus operators. So I'm not quite sure what data you're referring to.
Right here on the Meeting the Moment website,
Yeah, I know.
transitchicago.com performance metrics, and
Right.
it says rail, head count is decreasing.
Well, there might be more things that are a lot of other things that go beyond, we also wanna make sure that we're not having people go through the system and then being stuck at certain parts and then not being able to come on and be hired, right? So, I think there's more than just looking at a static piece of data and understanding there's a lot more around it.
Well, so thank you spots. What I would say is that, let me come back to your question. So in terms of the enhanced service and hiring more rail operators, this is where those revenue ideas come from, because, you know, they talk about progressives propose ideas and don't talk about it. I've been talking every year, the last 4 years I've had several revenue proposals, and so we're finally getting traction on those. And those revenue ideas would allow us to equip our transit agencies to be able to hire rail operators and bus operators with full fringe and benefits in the several hundreds, right? So we can do this, right? It's such a solvable problem, so I get frustrated because I don't understand why we can't move more quickly on these things. What I want to say is that some of the systems that are in place, and gentlemen talked about this earlier, have to also be more user-friendly, right? Like, you should be able to look at that data point and not have to conjecture about why the data looks the way it does at the point in time. That's really good for the staffer that is managing the agency that put the data out there for you as an interface, but it's not good for anybody who is a commuter or who's concerned about transit, who has to actually use the product. And so that's where I come in and try to make sure that your voices are being heard by the transit agencies and make sure that there's a follow-up. So that's what I'm looking into there. We're gonna get everybody, don't
Yeah,
worry.
we will, yeah.
We've heard several times tonight already about how fare collection and what have you is slowing down operations. We know that fare collection is generally a problem, and we know that if the more that fares are raised, the more that people are turned away. There are several cities, no major cities yet in the U.S., but certainly overseas, that have gone to a free system, and where we have found ways to place that cost where it belongs on the rich, on corporations that benefit from our use of these systems. Is there a possibility still that we could get free CTA or even free MMA or
Yeah.
whatever the final solution is, and place those costs? As you say, we have $6 billion in revenue that the Illinois Revenue Alliance has identified. There's plenty of room to work here, but a free fare system would clear up some of those operational issues. It would allow for us to not have to maintain those systems, and it would allow for more people to use these systems so that they wouldn't be relying on the cars that now are being removed so that we can have rapid transit systems.
Yeah. No, I think it's a really important observation. If I had my druthers, we would have a free transit system, because I do think that it's people always talk about how you get people to want to use public transit. You don't have to. And my thinking is you make it a scenario that no reasonable person would turn down. If I can leave my car at home or not buy a car and board a bus or a train that has BRT and all this other stuff for free, people are going to come out and droves to use public transit. So Senate Bill 1388 is a proposal that I've put into the mix on this that would cut in half fares for people who are earning under the SNAP federal cutoff, 138% of federal poverty level. It's probably like $25,000 for a family of two, right? To say that they should get an even deeper discount on public transit. For those who don't have the option to buy a car, right, that might be a little bit north of that, maybe 200% of the federal poverty level. I need some help in terms of some of my colleagues feeling the heat on that, because I don't think that I just haven't heard enough people talking about that. But what I can say is that last year we passed a transportation omnibus that creates a free and reduced pilot program for those that are survivors of domestic violence. For I believe they wanted to do a study on those that are returning citizens. Although I was like, what's there to study? Somebody that's returning home from prison needs to be able to get to work. You don't need to study on that. But I just point that out so you get a sense for like some of the myopic thinking sometimes on these kind of questions around poverty and working class issues that like I have to deal with in the Capitol all the time. And I think that more people in the community and our groups like our Better Street Chicago and other groups that start and have done this and sort of turn the heat up on that can really have us in a scenario where we can have even more affordable transit options, not just for those of the working poor, but those that are just really struggling and like can't afford $120 a month for a 24/7 pass. I hope that answers the question.
It would help to know who are the folks we have to hunt down and.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I want to be crystal clear on that too, I would say that so we have 10 organizations that we work with to do our town hall tonight. You know, just before you leave, check in with my staff because we can get you hooked up with them. And they already have like an undercurrent of organizing happening on this, and I feel like it'd make a lot of sense for more people to become a part of that. Active Transportation Alliance, Better Street Chicago, Bike Grid Now, Commuters Taking Action, Illinois Environmental Council, Metropolitan Planning Council, Chicago Metropolitan Planning, CMAP. These are all groups, Urban Environmentalists Illinois. These are groups that like really do organize and do this work. And so I would get hooked up with them if you haven't already. Definitely sign up for my newsletter because we always talk about what these groups are doing in terms of our builds. And I'm gonna stop there because I want to make sure we have 10 minutes. I want to make sure we get to all of our questions. All right, I'm gonna take over while you do that. Go ahead.
Yeah, my name's Sophia. I live in Uptown.
Okay.
You can speak up, please, because
Sure.
it's just a wide
Hello.
room and it's a shower room.
I live in Uptown.
Okay.
So my question is around getting through downtown. You mentioned a little bit of like you take the bus and then it takes 45 minutes to go a mile.
Right.
I know Manhattan's recently had a lot of success with congestion pricing.
Yes.
I don't know if that's on the table.
Yes. Yes.
Asking about congestion pricing in Manhattan has recently been very successful. Is that something that the state has influence over? Is that something the city would have to?
Yes.
Is that on the table? Because it both reduces vehicle traffic
Yes.
and provides revenue, so it's better on many fronts.
Yes. So the answer is yes. I actually have drafted a bill that would implement congestion pricing in Illinois. And the reason I did that is because I thought that we're gonna need this revenue, right? Again, like this is another revenue thing that can help us to equalize how people get from point A to point B. It makes sense to me that in areas where you have a lot of bottlenecks in terms of traffic, where people are still using cars and it really doesn't make sense for them, let's have a little bit more money to do that, and then let's use that to fund PRT. Let's use that to pay for more operational dollars, for more rail and bus operators, etc. So I hear you on that. And in terms of the accountability, that is something the state can absolutely move on. I have, like I said, I've drafted the bill on that. I'm waiting for it to actually go live and get hearings on it. It has been slow walk. But I think this is where other senators and reps need to fill a little bit of heat on this. And I think once that happens, these bills start to move. One thing that my job has taught me is that one senator or one rep, like, the power is limited. The power is really in numbers and packs, and so that's why I wrote the Senate Progressive Caucus, because when there's 10 people saying this stuff, it's different. But just to answer the question, yes, congestion pricing is absolutely on the table. New York has recently done this, and they've, you know, I have not heard that this has run into any major issues there, and so I think we need to get moving on it. And I've told my colleagues too, I don't want to study on it, because people in January are like, Senator, let's do a study on this. We don't need a study. Yeah, just look at New York, like best
Less traffic,
practices. Right.
more revenue, better transit,
Yeah.
fewer accidents.
Right.
I just wanted to chime in really quickly too and say that for everybody who registered or who came and wrote your email down, we are gonna send an email after this event. It'll include all of the transit partners and champions that we've mentioned, so we'll link to them so you can find their contact information and connect with them. You can also reply, or you can reach our office at Senator Mike Simmons @gmail.com. I swear we read those emails. We really do. We all read them. We respond to them. We actually all get emails into that shared inbox. So we will, if we don't get to everybody this evening, because we have so many good, thoughtful, detailed questions, I don't want you to feel like we're not able to connect with you. So please reach us that way, or if it's easier for us to do that more directly with you in person, just let us know. So anyway, okay.
Yep. Okay, we got about 8 minutes, so I want to make sure everybody's got a chance to ask their questions. Should we just?
Yeah, let's take the ones in the room. I
Okay.
do have the ones written down, and honestly, a lot of them have to do with, like, smoking on CTA trains, sticky floors, don't feel great bringing your kids on trains. Let's see what else. Folks who are sleeping on the trains because they don't have anywhere else to go. Just that general, like, it's not ideal, it's not pleasant to ride, and you know,
Yeah.
what can we do about that?
Yeah, why don't I address that, and then we'll make sure everybody that's in the room gets to answer their questions in the next 10 minutes. So on the smoking on trains issue, that's already law that you can't smoke on the trains and buses. It drives me crazy when I get on a public transit vehicle and I I see somebody either doing this on the vehicle or right outside the vehicle. I've seen this on Greyhound a few times where sometimes when the trains break down, I'll use Greyhound to get to Springfield, and people smoke in the bus barns, and it drives me crazy because I don't smoke and I don't want to experience the health risk of second-hand smoke or anybody else too. I don't have a silver bullet on this because it's one of these things where the law is the law and people are not following it. And I think the transit ambassadors is probably the first step there to just have like calm, humane, respectful people there who are plainly dressed, who have authority but are not going to put you in handcuffs for like the slightest infraction. On these buses and trains, that can kind of remind people, hey, you know what? We really don't want people smoking on the buses because it, you know, and kind of like laugh a little bit about it, but also be serious and say, I'm going to have to ask you to, you know, you cannot smoke here. You're going to have to go across the street. I think over time the culture will start to change, but that obviously is like not ideal. So that I'll leave it there.
Okay.
I'm mindful of the
So
time.
let's take the woods and
Yeah.
learn as much as we can.
Okay. Why don't we start in the back here?
Okay.
We're going
All right,
around.
sounds good.
Go ahead.
Yes, we've talked a lot about buses, and buses are great, but as we've also heard, they hit a lot of traffic. What are you doing about expanding the train system? I mean, we've got the red line, it'd be nice to have maybe a loop around city,
Yeah.
not just within city, but intercity, like between here and Milwaukee, out to,
Yep.
let's say, Minneapolis, St. Paul, or down to St. Louis, I mean, you've got Florida with their bright line that works great, rode it all the time, it's going all across the state, and they're kind of more of a conservative state. I'm kind of surprised they even have something that
Right.
amazing.
Yeah. I think that is an idea whose time has come. I'll be completely honest with you that I've not heard that as part of the discussions around the transit cliff. I think it makes sense to have, just to clarify what you're saying, a train system that can get people from intercity train system, but like across the state. So if you want to get not just the Amtrak that just goes in a straight line, but you know, how about folks that want to go out to the Quad Cities for the weekend, or folks that want to go, you know, not just in Milwaukee, but maybe up to Eau Claire or in Wisconsin, Madison. There will be a big infrastructure cost that comes with that. Like, I want to be honest about kind of what it would take to get there. And it would probably be in the several hundreds of millions of dollars to build new tracks and build new train systems. I am very passionate about transit, so politically that's something I would support and advocate for. But this is another one of those things where I think we're going to need kind of broad-based organizing around it for it to really come to fruition. Because the only thing that's in the works right now is expansion of Amtrak. So Amtrak currently has federal funding from 15 years ago, hasn't happened yet, to expand the Amtrak from Chicago out to Moline and Davenport and Quad Cities. That's supposed to happen in 2027. There's existing right-of-way that they would use to actually build that train, so it's probably not as expensive as it would be to create a new system. But let's put a working group together comprised of federal officials, state and local officials, and let's identify where we want to have these new systems, and let's see if there are any existing right-of-ways that would make it easy to do this in the same way that they're doing for Quad Cities. That's like my project plan, Pat, in terms of how it would happen, but there's nothing in the works that I'm aware of right now that would expand our current train system beyond the extension of the Red Line to 130th Street, which is important and I think absolutely should happen. We can just go in a circle, yeah, right.
Hi, I'm a citizen representative on the RTD's advisory committee.
Okay.
And when they presented their own bill, for the fiscal cliff and just in general what they're proposing, they mentioned that the legislature was requiring them to include a fare increase as a condition for any funding that they would receive in the legislature. And so I was wondering if you could speak one to the claim,
Yeah.
second, the position of the Progressive Caucus on that requirement,
Yeah.
and then thirdly, just like the legislators' reasoning behind that requirement as a whole.
Yeah, thank you for being here. I do not support any fare increases at all on any of our transit system or any of our riders. I don't. I have not heard any specific fare increase. The way you just framed it, where we basically don't pass a bill unless there's fare increase, I haven't heard that. That hasn't gotten to my ears. Doesn't mean that somebody's not floating it. But what I can tell you is your senators, I won't support that. I don't think that that's the right way to go. I think we need to move on those revenue ideas. We have like, how many, the revenue lines, how many billions?
$6 billion.
$6 billion that we have several mainstream community-based organizations that have done the work and done the math and vetted these ideas that we can move on as soon as the adjournment in May of the Illinois General Assembly, and I support every single one of them. So why would we want to do fare increases? Some might say that we should have fare increases for those that are higher up on the income ladder. I just just think of that as like, that's gonna be hard to implement, it's gonna run into all kind of bureaucratic nonsense, and it's not gonna get more people on our trains and buses, so I just would categorically not be in favor of that. Yeah.
Hello, my name is Michael Lennon, and I live in, the Edgewater uptown border. And, my question is there any movement towards getting rid of the 50% fare box requirement?
Yeah.
Trains here, cause elsewhere in the United States even, the state and whatnot funds far more
Yep.
than here, and it's really handicapped. So.
Yeah. Before I answer that question, I'm gonna ask permission to just extend this another 15 minutes. If you have to go, I will not be offended. If you wanna connect with my staff, you can pull them aside, but I just wanna make sure we get, this is a lot of content for an hour and a half. So yes, the fare box recovery ratio, this is a little bit wonky, but I'll try to do it in 30 seconds. So the way we fund our transit systems is through a hodgepodge of different funding sources from different levels of government. The state of Illinois has historically underfunded transit systems, and to a degree that is embarrassing. So the 50% fare box recovery ratio essentially means that 50% of the revenues that fund our transit systems are expected to come from CTA riders when they pay for their fares. I don't think that that's the right way to do this. I can tell you that I'm happy to report that Senate Bill 1938 phases this out, so that I think it would go from 50% to 25% in 2028. I think it would go to 20% in 2029, and then in 2030 it would give the General Assembly the power to decide what the fare box recovery ratio is. I'm so in the weeds on this that I have said I like that we're phasing out the fare box recovery ratio. I am really anxious about giving the General Assembly in 2030 because there will be another crisis, and then how do I know it won't go up to 75% of the revenue coming from riders such as us? So I'm glad you brought it up. I would have brought it up earlier, and I should have mentioned that a lot sooner. But yes, there it is. Courtney?
So, my understanding is that the city of Chicago can ticket people who park in a dedicated bus lane. I've been told that state, law would have to be changed to ticket people who drive in a dedicated bus lane. What is your understanding of that? And is there any movement towards remedying this?
Yeah, that is something that again would fall under the municipal government. So that's going to be a question for our alders and for our mayor. I don't have formal power over the right of way and parking in our city's streets about this question. And that also, even on our state routes like that, those powers, as far as I know, don't, in terms of parking, don't fall under the state. But I will look into that because there may be some wiggle room there for Irving Park, Peter City, some of our state routes. Yes, you're waiting a long time.
I just want to, I want to thank you, first of all, for talking about getting buses that aren't polluting buses so much. We live in the area where you grew up, and so we're on Lincoln, and if I step out onto my deck, the buses all have their exhaust pipes on the roof.
Oh boy.
And so we get it right in our, right on the deck. I have to run in and shut the door. It
Yeah.
smells so horrible.
Yeah.
So it's really critical, not only for our health, but just, general air pollution. So I hope that that's something that can be moved on
Yeah.
sooner than later.
Absolutely, I think it's really important that we do that. So I grew up on Foster Avenue, and there's a bus garage on Foster Avenue, and so there always are buses coming down Foster that finish up their routes, which I loved as a kid. I actually thought that was really cool, but I remember every time one of those buses pulled off from in front of the Dunkin' Donuts, all of the exhaust would go right into our living room.
Yeah.
And I knew even as a kid, I was like, this does not feel
Yeah.
like it should be happening. So, zero emissions buses are really important for that, to just cut down the overall level of exhaust and pollution. But also, to the point about just having the buses be configured in a way where you don't even have that as an issue, right? Because some people are also going to have issues around noise. I don't mind the sound of buses, right? I think they sound great.
But actually, it's a lot of noise.
It is a lot of noise, especially where you live.
Yeah.
Because you've got two busy arterials right there, and the North Park garage. So I hear that.
And just quickly, one more thing.
Yeah.
Foster, getting into that area is, we almost lose a lung or a kidney driving, bouncing around.
Yeah.
What can happen there? Because I know that's a state highway.
Mm-hmm. So you mean what can happen in terms of
Fixing it.
the pollution?
No, just the horrible condition of it.
The actual road itself.
Yeah.
So that is something that the state or the city could put money into repaving the road. In 2021, I was able to secure, I think it was $2 million to repave Foster Avenue from Lakeshore Drive up to Clark. We did a number of other state routes in the district that really needed that. So I think the first thing we want to do is to talk with our alders and see if they already have plans to repave any of those roads, because they do this a lot more often than the state does. But I think it'd be important for, like, I can talk to Alderman Vasquez and say, hey, where are your arterial resurfacing projects?
Yeah, I volunteer in his office, so
Okay.
I'll ask him.
Please do, yeah.
But I thought because it was a state highway that it wasn't the alders who dealt with that.
It's joint,
Okay.
it's joint jurisdiction.
Oh, I'll be
Yeah.
talking to him.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Drake Warren. Thank you for hosting this tonight. It makes me really happy to see your focus on collaborative governance. And it seems like a lot of this vision for reimagining our transit system will rely on a lot of collaboration to get as far as possible, because stakeholders like the city and like the county have jurisdiction over different pieces of infrastructure in their own areas of influence. So, trying to make this concise, how do we get the stakeholders in the same room having a conversation about pushing this as far as possible over the finish line? And how do we get everybody pulling in the same direction to make transit better for us?
Yeah. Well, in terms of getting the stakeholders all together, that's just organizing, right? I mean, that's something that we can do at any time. This is a good part of that. I think just having us here with a lot of those stakeholders that I mentioned earlier, those stakeholders are all very accessible. I mean, if you were to reach out directly to them and propose pulling something together, I would absolutely sponsor that. I mean, we open this office, and the thing I really have tried to do with the State Senate office is open it up so people understand what it is and where their agency fits into what gets done in our capital. So, the vote on this could happen as soon as the end of May, right? The chance cliff with the budget. Between now and then, if folks want to do a smaller thing with one of these particular stakeholders, I will, if I can be there and not in the capital, I'll be there to help kind of, just be there and like confer some importance to the issue or help to facilitate communication from opposing points of view, and make sure that all gets incorporated in the final product. So that I would suggest we talk after this about what you're thinking and then try to identify who should be a part of it. Yes.
I have a suggestion on the congestion pricing.
Okay.
Get the data out of New York on a number of things. It actually works. You're getting slightly more revenue than they expected. The restaurant industry has turned out to be happy. Their receipts are up. And the buses point to a point that I was making about respecting the problems bus drivers have. Buses are running better schedules now because of the congestion pricing. But all kinds of good things. A lot of people that were against it are never accepted. It'll take a while, I know you. Some guy from the coal mill in Illinois or something's gonna say this.
No, not at all.
But I think the constituents need to vote for it. And on the point about the electric electric bus vehicles, there's a bus factory in West Virginia. And because of that, Shelley Caputo, which is called, got the electric program saved. She might not have wanted to do that. She got pressure from her state, 2,000 people working.
Sure. Yeah.
That's about the electric school buses, actually.
Oh, yeah.
General funding for electric school buses,
Yeah.
which, CPS did get an award, one of the largest awards for electric school buses, $20 million for 50 buses. There's, progress seems to be very slow in implementation.
Yeah.
But, anyway, thank you for all you're doing.
Absolutely.
Pushing SB 5 and electric buses, all types, in addition to saving the fiscal.
Absolutely. No, and the congestion pricing, the data point, the suggestion you just made around getting the data from New York is absolutely spot on. So we're doing that as we speak and trying to drum up support for
So
it.
director of chief of staff to go get the.
Yeah, or me. I mean, that's all day. Yeah. All right, right here, you've been waiting a while. Yeah.
So, a bunch of questions that were over time, so two quick ones. Is there any consideration for incorporating micromobility into the IFMA or the other side bill? So that's like Divvy, for instance, would be accessible with the Venture card and like tap onto that as opposed to having to go through a separate
CTA's getting a better abbreviation than MMA.
Did you submit a question beforehand? A lot of you did. I wanted to say thank you from the bottom of my heart. The questions that you all proposed were really thought-provoking. I read every one of them, and I appreciate the engagement. Somebody asked a similar question to the one you just asked. The MMA, I get, is a very, like, Metropolitan Mobility Authority. It sounds kind of scary, and a lot of people say, well, CTA is what people recognize. So, you know, I think if SB 5 were to get to some form of passage, there can be a conversation around what the final branding would look like. In terms of micromobility, for folks that didn't hear the question, what was your name?
Scott.
Scott asked if micromobility is part of any of the discussions around the transit cliff, and I'll be honest with you, it has not been. And not in the way it should be, because you're right. For folks that want to have a multimodal approach to transit, they might decide that they want to start their first 2 miles on the bus, then they want to get a divvy for the following 3 miles, then they want to hop on Metro. Wouldn't it be nice to have the same app and the same fare collection system that just taps for each one of those? I would use Divvy a lot more, but I don't often have time to stand there in the machine and like do all this and pull out a credit. I don't have a Divvy membership because I don't bike anymore when it's under 40 degrees, and I'm a very avid cyclist. And so it just has to be easier for people. There's an argument we were talking about earlier, is that these systems have to be a lot easier for the end users. And so I like the idea. You know, we'll try to amplify that in some of these discussions. But what I suspect will happen is that the transit agencies will implement that on their own if they should still be in the current form after we pass the transit cliff. But I will advocate for that because I think it makes sense.
My question is answered.
Okay, let's do 4 more. Million in the back, you, and there was one more. Okay, we'll do you 4 again. I want to respect folks' time. Let's start in front. Here. Right here. Yeah.
So, as a disabled individual, prior to using my crutches, I used a wheelchair, and a lot of the stops that are ADA compliant or were at some point are not currently. So I think another way that we could get rid of that bus stretching is making sure that people with disabilities and seniors can get onto the buses in a timely fashion by actually creating a space that they can get onto the bus or get onto the train without having to have the ramp go down and then there be another curve, because at some point in the last 5 years, someone installed a small garden bed there, which is something that I came across, and we had to completely get me back on the bus, close the ramp, which takes about 2 minutes, drive further down the road, and by the time I was able to get off the bus had hit another red light.
Yeah.
So, which I'm sure put everyone else behind.
Yeah.
What can we do to actually check the ADA compliance and the ADA accessibility of the stops throughout Chicago to make sure that these things don't happen?
Yeah. I think that's first of all.
Can you repeat that? Can you repeat
Yeah,
the
I
question?
can.
I couldn't hear
You want me to paraphrase it? You want to?
Yeah, you can paraphrase, that's fine.
So what this constituent is saying is that as a person with a disability, you've been in a situation where you try to board a bus, and because of like something that's in front of the place where you board, the bus had to move another block or go to another, and it just creates. First of all, that's so frustrating for you to have to deal with. It's frustrating for keeping the bus. It doesn't work. It's loose for everybody. So the question is, what can we do about that? And I think that we should have basically an audit of all of our CTA stops across the city. I mean, that's essentially what you're suggesting, to see how ADA compliant are they really. And I think that that's something that we can raise in these discussions. And so it's a fantastic idea. I'm happy to champion that, because it's also not hard to implement. Right? I mean, we can figure this out and see where there's accessibility deserts in Chicago and make that a priority to rectify, as we're rectifying frequency of service in areas that are underserved, etc. It can be a part of all of that. So, thank you. Yes.
Yeah. So I was wondering, in what specific ways does combining all the 3 major transit agencies into the MMA achieve efficiency? Like, is it just a question of reducing overlap, or?
It's a really good question. So the question is, how this whole debate around consolidating all the transit agencies, what does that mean in terms of efficiency? The answer is that, wouldn't it be more efficient if one agency was doing all the procurement of buses instead of 3 or 4 different boards or agencies that are not accountable to riders in other jurisdictions? So procurement of buses and contracts and equipment, also project planning. So we talk about BRT. If we wanted to do a BRT on Irving Park, right, had to go from the lake all the way out to the Forest Preserve end of the line. we'd have to have some sort of intergovernmental agreement with another jurisdiction that manages that particular suburb, right? Wouldn't it be great to have one agency that would have the ability to identify BRT as a priority across 3 different jurisdictions and then execute on it without waiting on the political winds to turn in this particular suburb or a particular mayor to decide that they're gonna run to actually make something, right? That's where I think the efficiency deliverable really is all about. And schedules, right? Like scheduling so that if you're getting off of one particular mode onto another, it's seamless, right? I take the bus to the end of the line, the train is there, and it's not like, oh, you just missed this metro, the next one's an hour. Right. Yeah. I think, by the way, I think we could get there under Senate Bill 1938, but I think we're gonna have to codify in statute if that particular language passes on what those efficiencies look like. And that's part of what I've been trying to pull together, because I don't trust the agencies to just look at their own. They have hard jobs and a lot of other stuff going on. Okay, we got one more in the back there, and then Million, you'll be last.
Denise McIntosh, Edgewater, thank you so much.
Of course.
You said at the beginning we have a hole that is $770 million. What are the options for filling that hole?
So the options for filling the $770 million hole, there's 2 answers. One is there's the Senate Bill 5 and Senate Bill 1938, which you can see that are on the table. The final version of this will probably look different from both of those bills, and that's part of why this town hall is really important. In terms of the actual money, where's the money coming from? I think for me, it comes back to the revenue ideas that I and several of my colleagues have brought forward, right? So the tax on digital ads is one that would, right away, the estimates of that would be $800 million the state would collect year over year. And that's important because that's not, the COVID money that created this situation was like one-time or 2-year funding that is expired. But if you get a revenue stream that is year over year, you don't run into the same problem in 5 years. And an issue where they decide to jack up the fare box recovery ratio and have riders pay for more of the transit services. The other is there are some revenue ideas that labor groups have brought forward. I don't know that those have gotten a lot of support, to be completely honest with everyone in the room. You know, one of the ideas that has been proposed is increasing taxes on services. So, you know, taxes on dry cleaning and hair salons and things like that. I think that is really regressive, and so I've been very clear that I will not support taxes on services to try to fix these big structural problems. But I do think that those revenue ideas that we have put together with the Revenue Alliance make a lot of sense, and they also echo what other states have done on this. And we have congestion pricing that'd be another option that we can pull out on the table that would be directly responsive to the challenge.
Senator, did you
So
want
it's all
the
new
list?
money.
What's that?
It's all new money.
Yeah, this would all be new revenue, and it'd be year over year, unlike COVID money, which was time stamped. Yeah.
Senator, did you want the list to read off to people?
No, that's fine. I mean, we have copies of that to pass out to folks. I don't want to. We're out of time, so I want to. Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I think we got to everyone's questions. Thank you so much, everybody, for coming tonight. I just wanted to say thank you in closing to the Chicago Park District, to Broadway, Armory, 20th District Police, and everybody that helped to pull together tonight. Thank you so much. Get home safe, everybody.
Thank you, my question answered.
Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry.
Thank you.
Yes, how are you?
How are